Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, March 8th, Friday, May 8th, but what two days really matter at this point? They're all just blending together. I hope you're all doing well. Mr. Tinnel here, and this is the World War I on the Homefront lesson. So you guys went through the America, the Story of Us video. That hit a lot of the main topics of World War II. This video is going to go over some more depth on those things and then some more minute details of what was going on in the United States during World War II. Stick around halfway through this. I have a task. We'll talk about that halfway through. And you'll get a prize in the mail if you go through with that. So thinking about good things, my good thing is yesterday I received a gift from a local catering company of a meal. Without getting into a ton of details on it, families were able to buy teachers meals, and I had a family of students that I teach buy me a meal, and I got a big lasagna platter, huge, big lasagna platter. Oh gosh, it was so good. It was just the cheesiest, meatiest lasagna tray I've had in a very, very long time. Jen and I loved it. It was fantastic. So I appreciate the family giving me that. I appreciate the great food, and I appreciate the other gifts I've gotten. Thank you for acknowledging Teacher Appreciation Week Day. I really appreciate it. I know this has been some tough times, so I definitely appreciate any love that I get, and I'm trying to give that back to you guys, especially with this this challenge thing I'm going to do halfway through. It's my appreciation to you guys, saying thank you for sticking with it and watching these videos. So let's jump into it. We are looking at World War II on the home front. There are guided notes with this. So the guided notes are here. They're pretty easy. If you just watch through this presentation, you'll be able to answer these questions, no problem. And a quick heads up while it's at the top of my head, I did enter in the completion grades for the Great Depression Lightbox. I went through and graded all those. If you have not completed that, complete it. The America, the Story of Us questions were due yesterday. If you didn't do that, go back and complete it. I will be grading those and entering those grades in as complete, or I'll just be reading through your answers and all that soon. So complete those two things if you haven't. All right, on to the lesson. So the first thing you saw in America, the Story of Us was the attack on Pearl Harbor. So the attack on Pearl Harbor was what started us into World War II. World War II had already been going on, but we stayed out of it. What drove us into World War II was the attack on Pearl Harbor. So why did it happen? So the United States was dominating trade with China. Think back to imperialism, American imperialism. We went into the Philippines and controlled the Philippines so that we could have easy access with trade to China. We had the open door policy with China. We were dominating trade with China. We were allowing people to trade with China. But we didn't let Japan into trade with China. We shut the door on them. Japan sees this as an act of aggression. This gets them angry. This gets them resentful of us. This all builds up to a sneak attack on our naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on December 7th, 1941. FDR says is a day which will live in infamy. President Roosevelt calls it a day which will live in infamy. 2 battleships were completely destroyed. 2 more were sunk. 188 aircraft were destroyed, 2,400 soldiers were killed. This act of war forces us into World War II. So we see the attack that brings us in. And again, this lesson is going to focus on things that are going on in the United States, not the European front. So one of the major issues that happens in the United States is once the war starts, we see Japanese American citizens being interred. They are being Japanese American citizens, mostly on the West Coast, is where most Japanese American citizens were. Japanese American citizens were being removed from their homes and sent to camps where they were concentrated so that they could be watched. So why? Why was this happening? Americans were afraid that Japanese American citizens were working with Japan. Now think about how crazy that is. You have Japanese American citizens, people who came to the United States for progress, to want to live better lives. Why would they make all of that effort to come over here just to destroy the United States? And that's what this political cartoon is trying to say. This is basically propaganda against Japanese. This is saying that all Japanese American citizens are coming over to the United States so that they can destroy it from within. And let's also acknowledge this is a racist political cartoon. These are racist caricatures of Japanese people. But the crazier thing on this, and you may have seen it already, look down here at the bottom. You see who did this? Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss did a lot of actually really good political cartoons. He did a lot of really thoughtful political cartoons during World War II. However, this is not one of them. This is a political cartoon that, in retrospect, looking back, this is racist and wrong, and it's judging an entire race of people for no good reason. So you see Japanese Americans being prejudiced against them. And this is a very important thing to remember. You cannot lump every single person in because of where they're from, because of the color of their skin. And this is a constant struggle that we have in this country. We see it after 9/11. We've seen it with this virus. You can't lump everyone in based on the color of their skin, based on their race, based on where they're from. That's not to say that we shouldn't, be mindful of what's going on, but we have to investigate. We have to learn. We can't just jump to conclusions. And that's what we were doing with Japanese internment. So Executive Order 9066 said that any people on the West Coast with Japanese ancestry could be rounded up and locked away. Over 110 to 120,000 Americans with Japanese ancestry were put into camps. Again, American citizens put into camps because of the color of their skin, because of where they're from. Just the constitutionality of this is mind-boggling. And this is one thing that President Roosevelt does have a black eye in history over. This was something that he allowed that is incredibly wrong. The idea that American citizens could be taken and put into camps like this in the middle of America is sad and disappointing that that could happen in our country. Now, one clarification, this was not a concentration camp like Germany's concentration camps. Japanese Americans were not being killed. That is not what happened. They were being sent into these camps to be isolated, which is wrong, but they were not being killed. This is a very, very important distinction to make. Do not mix the two up. So Germany begins focusing on the United States, specifically with German U-boats. German U-boats started attacking ships along the coast of the United States. Throughout the course of the war, over 400 ships were sunk. This is a map of the Outer Banks that shows all of the sunken ships along the coast. And there's a really cool story on one of the ships that is sunk down here off the coast of the Outer Banks. So we're looking at Ocracoke. If you did the Outer Banks trip last year, you went to Ocracoke. This is one of the coolest stories when somebody asks me, like, Mr. Tinnel, what's the coolest story about North Carolina that you teach about? This is the coolest story that I teach about. I love this story. So British naval ships were stationed along the coast to protect merchant ships on the United States. So the British were helping us along the coast. The HMT Bedfordshire was stationed off the Ocracoke coast protecting ships. While it was there, it was sunk by a German U-boat. And appreciate how crazy that is too. German U-boats were visible off the coast of North Carolina. You could stand on the Outer Banks and look out and see German U-boats. That's terrifying. We think that the war didn't happen here, but it was right at our front gates. So this British ship that was helping protect the coast was sunk, and citizens of Ocracoke risked their lives to attempt to rescue the British soldiers. All 37 of those soldiers died, or also 37 of those sailors died. 5 bodies were recovered though, and they were buried on Ocracoke Island. So those 5 bodies, those 5 British sailors that are buried on Ocracoke Island are buried in a small patch of land in North Carolina. And that small patch of land is officially owned by Britain. The United States gave that land to Britain so that those sailors could be buried in Britain. So one of the most fun pieces of trivia in North Carolina history. You can go to the Outer Banks on Ocracoke Island and visit Britain. There is a piece of British soil on Ocracoke Island. It's fascinating. And no, you don't need a passport. No, you don't have to follow British laws when you're there. It's symbolic, but we did give that land to the British. So very cool. And very literally, that land is leased to Britain in perpetuity. That is British land that we have basically gave them. Very cool story. So quickly going through these sections, I'm not going to go into depth on this. If you want to read up on it, you can. There's a very cool story from this woman, Sally Robinson. She talks about World War II in Charlotte. First part of her story that is very cool is there were, during the war, German prisoners of war were sent to North Carolina. Charlotte specifically, there were lots of German POWs, prisoners of war, in Charlotte. If you know where Freedom Park is in Charlotte, a lot of that area was cleared out by German prisoners of war. We put German prisoners of war to work while we had them here. They were treated pretty nicely, actually, but they were put to work while they were here. Additionally, Sally Robinson talks about food rations. So if you think back to World War I, we talked about victory gardens, how victory gardens were places where things that we did to build up our food supply. We didn't want to buy stuff because we wanted to save that for soldiers. That was just suggested in World War I. In World War II, it's required. The government says you must save resources. So saving food and goods was not just suggested, it was required, it was law. Ration books limited the amount of food and goods a citizen could buy. So you could only buy so many groceries. And you had to have your ration book, and you have to have stamps to say which things you've bought. You can only buy so much bread, so many groceries, so much stuff, tires, sugar, shoes, everything that could be used in war had to be rationed, had to be spread out across the country. And just think about how crazy that is. It's wild that the government would step in and say, no, you can't buy whatever you want. Some examples of ration books here. There's a lot of really good information here, but we're not going to have time to look through that. In North Carolina, the government is putting North Carolinians to work. Like you saw in that America Story of Us video where women were building ammunitions. We see North Carolinians and women working on the coast building airplanes, doing a lot with putting planes together. Cherry Point Marine Corps Station, you guys kind of drove out in that area when you did the Outer Banks trip also. Quickly talking about the GI Bill. The GI Bill was the government's effort to thank veterans. The GI Bill gave many benefits to veterans, including low interest loans, unemployment benefits, and most notably, free college tuition. We treated our soldiers better after World War II than we did in World War I. After World War I, we saw the bonus army. We saw protests because soldiers weren't being paid their back pay. After World War II, we fixed that. We make sure that we are treating our soldiers better, making sure they can get jobs by going to college, making sure they can survive, buy homes, all of those good things. We also saw tension because there was work that needed to be done. We saw that Great Migration that we've talked about. We saw the Great Migration happening, African Americans coming from the South to the North to do work. But that leads to a lot of tension across northern cities. So we see many race riots in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. There's a good America, the Story of Us episode that I don't think we're going to get to watch that really does a great job describing this if you are so inclined to go back and watch previous episodes. All right, our last topic of the day is the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb. So we see all this war happening. We have to figure out what it's going to take to end it. The European front has ended. And actually today is the anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. But Japan, the Pacific Front, fighting Japan was not done yet. We had defeated Germany. We had not defeated Japan. Japan would not stop. Japan was going to fight to the death. So the United States feared that an invasion of Japan would result in 200,000 American casualties and perhaps 1 to 2 million Japanese casualties. We considered using an atomic bomb to end the war, and you saw the development of that in the Manhattan Project. So President Truman warned Japan to surrender or else face complete destruction. Japan refused. The U.S. drops bombs on Hiroshima that killed 70,000 immediately. Nagasaki that killed 40,000 immediately. Several thousand more died after this. Japan will then surrender 5 days later. And this then is VJ Day, which is the victory in Japan in the end of World War II. See some shots of this. This is the Enola Gay. The Udvar Hazy Air and Space Museum in Washington holds the Enola Gay. It is a beautiful, beautiful bomber. So that's where we are today. It's a quick run through of World War II on the home front. There's a lot of stuff we can't cover because of time. I highly suggest, if you haven't watched that Story of Us episode, watch that Story of Us episode. If you have questions on more depth on anything, please ask. And I forgot to get to the challenge of the day. If you have not gotten any stickers yet, so this is only for people who haven't gotten stickers. If you have got stickers, hold off for a bit. You can still do this, but I'm not going to send you any because you already got one. If you want stickers, lots of cool stickers. And they are actually like kind of fun. They're not just like, oh, cool by Mr. Tinnel standards. No, there are some actual cool stickers. Send me a good thing on Friday. So today is Friday. You have all day. Watch this video at some point and send me a good thing sometime today, and I will put some stickers in the mail as a thank you for watching the video. I sent out a bunch last week. I totally don't mind. It's a lot of fun for me. So that's all I have for today. Send me a good thing. I'll send you some stickers, and I hope you guys are well. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.